Welcome back. All right, so most hockey fans, if you ask them, you say which conference is stronger between the East and the West, they'll say the East. What's interesting is the two most recent Stanley Cup champions are out of the West. Vegas Golden Knights this year, last year was Colorado Avalanche. But what I've got on the board here are 8 teams in the order of odds, the greatest odds to win the Stanley Cup. So it puts Pittsburgh on the board, a team that missed the playoffs, and it knocks the Islanders off the board, a team that made the playoffs. But I had to cap it at 8 teams. So it cuts off the Islanders, it cuts off Ottawa, it cuts off Detroit. And these are teams that people think could be in the playoffs. And, of course, Buffalo. So, Carolina seen as the likely favorite. Their record this past season, 52-21-9. And it's a good record, right? They were one of the best teams in the league. Boston seen as probably taking a bit of a drop. So, makes sense to have Carolina at first on this. Their starter, Freddie Anderson, can he stay healthy? Question mark with Freddie Anderson is, can he stay healthy? And then I decided to do a core 4 for all of these teams and just pick out the 4 that I think are those core players. But some teams have more than 4, right? So for Carolina, I opted for Aho, Svechnikov, Necas, who are all forwards, and Slavin. I don't feel like there's a goaltender who qualifies as a core 4 because Anderson, how much longer will he be the starter? Ranta's on a 1-year deal. Kochetkov is the guy who's in waiting. So, yeah, those are the 4 that I went with. And I think that's a solid core. I do. Svechnikov, of course, needs to stay healthy. But if he can, and again, if their goaltending stays healthy, Carolina could very well be that Stanley Cup champion in 2024. Now, between 2019-2020 and 2020-2023, trying to get a feel for which teams have been consistently good. Carolina's record has been 180 wins, 78 regulation losses, 30 losses in overtime or shootouts. Points percentage 677, which is one of the highest on the board, not the highest. Boston has the highest. We'll get to them. 2019 and 2023, they get to the conference final. They get swept both times. So for Carolina, they're close. They're not that far off. It's just a matter of getting over that hump in the conference final. This could very well be the year. Now, with their team captain, Jordan Staal, he's been here a long time. Solid two-way forward. Definitely towards the end of his career at this point. But still, very good player and a leader on and off the ice. And a very good two-way forward at this stage of the game. So Carolina's got a really well-rounded roster. They've got some playoff success. Just getting those wins in the conference final really important. New Jersey finished 52-22-8, so almost an identical record to Carolina. Vanacek is probably the starter. I say probably because Schmid definitely played well last year and got some playoff time as well. So we'll see how training camp and the preseason goes. The core 4 for me with New Jersey: Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Dougie Hamilton, and Jesper Bratt. Now I thought about Luke Hughes, but he doesn't have enough games for me to qualify him as being in the core 4. Dougie Hamilton had a great year. Hughes and Hischier took that next step. And Bratt has consistently improved every year. Their record over that same period of time from 2019-2020 through until this past season: 126 wins, 127 regulation losses, 36 losses in overtime or shootouts for a .498 points percentage, which is the lowest of any team on the board. The playoffs in 2023, their first since 2018. They were my pick for the Stanley Cup this year and are my pick for the Stanley Cup this year. And we will see whether or not they're able to get over the hump. But it really feels like they took that next evolutionary step, and now it's just a matter of playoff success. They did get to the second round. Now it's a matter of getting further. Nico Hischier is the captain. Hischier, one of those European captains, and of course there was a time in the NHL where you would hear that, well, that team's never going to win a cup because they have a European captain. Don't hear that as much anymore, do we? So thanks to Nick Lidstrom and all that. But for New Jersey, I think all of the pieces are in place for this team to win. This may be a good year for teams that wear red and black on the ice. Getting us now to Toronto. Toronto, another good regular season, 50-21-11. They got out of the first round, got stopped in the second round. Their starting goaltender this year is Samsonov. Samsonov had a good year for Toronto. Their core 4, much talked about, right? Matthews, Nylander, Tavares, Marner. Not necessarily in that order. And of course, there's discussions about, Nylander and the fact he's a UFA next summer. Discussions about what Marner's next contract's going to look like. But in reality, that core 4 talked about a lot. And so we'll see how things go for that core 4 this year. Their record over that period of time from 2019-2020 until 2022-2023, 175 wins, 81 losses in regulation, 34 losses in overtime or shootouts, 662 points percentage. Solid points percentage there. They've made the playoffs for 7 straight seasons. So this year would be 8. And again, it doesn't matter. Toronto is no longer a team where, regulation or regular season wins are going to generate a lot of buzz. If they go on a 10-game winning streak this year, guaranteed, all anybody's going to be saying is, yeah, but what's going to happen in the playoffs? Which I think is valid. I think it's absolutely valid, and I think that's been valid since 2020 when they lost that qualifying round against Columbus. So their captain is John Tavares. We'll see how this core 4 goes this year under Brad Treliving. With that change in GM, that could change things for them. So this could be the final year of the core 4, whatever that means. Doesn't mean Nylander doesn't re-sign. Just if things don't work this year, they may do some form of blowing it up, but we'll see, right? Boston 65-12-5. Nobody expects them to win 65 games this coming season. Their starter, Linus Ullmark, I don't know that anybody's picking him to have the same kind of season this coming year as he had last season. Really realistic projections for Ullmark I've seen so far from most. That his numbers will still be very good, but not like last season. So the core 4 for me with Boston, Pastrnak has to be there. Marchand absolutely has to be there. And with them, I went with 2 blue liners, McAvoy and Lindholm. Lindholm stepped it up while McAvoy was out to start the season last year. And I think both of them are core guys, which is why it's too bad they couldn't have kept Orlov, because that would have been an absolutely fantastic blue line. That being said, they have the best record over the overall number since 2019-2020. I'll get there. Their wins, 193, so the most of any team. 68 regulation losses, 29 losses in overtime or shootouts, a 716 points percentage. Greatly improved points percentage via the numbers last season, of course, where their points percentage was insane. Absolutely insane. They reached the finals in 2019, of course. They've been out in the first round the last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, which does show that there are some things for the Boston Bruins to work on. This year, they're also coming in without Bergeron, without Krejci. That's going to affect them negatively. And their captaincy currently, as I'm recording this, is vacant. There's a lot of speculation about Marchand ending up with that C. I wouldn't rule out McAvoy. We know McAvoy's going to be there a long time. He's a younger player. I also wouldn't necessarily rule out Pastrnak. He's going to be there a long time, well paid, forward, and all of that. But could it be Marchand for the next few years? It could. Tampa Bay, 46-30-6 this past season. Their starting goaltender, of course, famously Vasilevsky. And Vasilevsky's a huge part of this team. When we look at the core 4 in Tampa, the question we'll start asking now is one of, so has their Stanley Cup final runs that they've had, is that done now? Are we not going to see them in a final again until they've gone through some years of downtime? So Stamkos, Kucherov, Hedman, Vasilevsky, to me, those are your 4 core guys. Yes, you could make an argument for Point. Yes, you could make an argument for Sergachev. Yes, you could make an argument for Cirelli. This is why I'm saying some teams you can make an argument way more than just a core 4. But I whittled it down to those 4. Their record over the last 4 years, 176 wins, 91 regulation losses, 23 losses in overtime or shootouts, 647 points percentage. So they had the Stanley Cups in 2020 and 2021, in the finals in 2022. But outside of that, first round losses in 2019 and now 2023. So this is the first long off season they've had in 4 years. That could rejuvenate them. That could have them turn things around and get going in the right direction. But we will see whether or not that happens. There's been somewhat of an erosion of the regular season results over the last couple of years. We could also look at that and say they're pacing themselves. I would expect them to pace themselves again this season. And, of course, their captain is Steven Stamkos, and the health of Steven Stamkos, plus how much he's going to get on his next contract and for how long. That'll be a nice topic of conversation. The Tampa Bay Lightning wanting to keep that window for another Stanley Cup wide open. Other teams and fan bases hoping that it's closed and stays that way. But as long as Tampa Bay is a playoff team, they need to be watched and they need to be viewed as dangerous. You've got Vasilevsky in net. You've got a lot of key guys who can score. And even with the erosion of some of their depth, This is a team that can surprise people and could very well win another Stanley Cup. Which brings me to the Rangers. The New York Rangers, a team that could be on their way to another Stanley Cup. They're 47, 22, and 13 this past season. It felt like a bit of a step down from the year before. However, with Shesterkin as the starter, I really don't want to bet against them because Shesterkin he's that good. And even though last year was a down year from the year before, it's like the year Ullmark just had. Nobody expected a replication of that. But Igor's still excellent, one of the best goalies in the league. Their core four, Panarin, Zibanejad, Fox, and Shesterkin. Now, of course, a lot of discussions about Panarin and his place with the team coming off that playoff loss in the first round. I expect Panarin to be fired up this year and to have a really good, strong regular season and then postseason as well. Their record over the last 4 years, 163 wins, 97 regulation losses, 30 losses in overtime or shootouts for a points percentage of .614. And after a conference final appearance in 2022, they were out in the first round this past season. Look for them to be kind of fired up by that, including their captain, Jacob Trouba. So Trouba, the captain of the team, I don't even have him in the core four because if I put Trouba instead of Fox, I rightfully would get absolutely grilled for it. So this is a team that has a lot of potential, and with the fact that Fox and Shesterkin are still relatively early for their positions especially, this is a team that should contend for a long time to come, as long as the forward group holds up. And if that kid line starts to get advanced in the lineup and given a little bit more ice time, who knows, right? And then you got Florida. Florida coming off of what was an up-and-down regular season, 42, 32, and 8 overall. Barely beat out Pittsburgh for that final playoff spot. But with Bobrovsky as the starter, they go all the way to the Stanley Cup final before Vegas pushes them aside. But they go from being underdogs to now they're seen as a team that should remain in the playoff hunt. It's interesting to see them at 7th in the overall odds right now. But again, different websites, different odds. So I just went by the one that I thought, yeah, that looks like about where I think most of the betting's going to be. You guys can let me know who you think's overrated and underrated in terms of again, the odds on favorites to come out and win a Stanley Cup out of the East. But for the Florida Panthers, their core four, I went with Matthew Tkachuk and Sasha Barkov up front. Aaron Ekblad on the blue line, who clearly is still underrated by many, and Sergei Bobrovsky in net, who had a good year. His numbers weren't necessarily great if you look at the standard numbers, but his advanced stats were solid. So he needs the defense to be a little bit better in front of him. Montour and Ekblad are out. We'll see how that affects the defense in front of him. It's going to be fascinating. Their record over the last 4 years, 172 wins, 90 losses in regulation, 27 losses in overtime or shootouts, 642 points percentage. That has to be the best points percentage over a 4-year period we've ever seen from Florida. Florida Panthers, of course, infamous for the amount of empty seats there's been over the years, but that seems to have been resolved this season, and we'll see if that continues this coming season. It should. This is a team that just went to the Stanley Cup final and won a President's Trophy the year before. So this is also the first time that they've won a round in back-to-back years. So they won the first round in 2022, and now this year they win 3 more rounds. So helping the playoff resume of the franchise, because prior to that, it had been since 1996 without a single win in the first round. Of course, their captain is Alexander or Sasha Barkov. Barkov, one of the better captains, I think, in the NHL if you want to rank captains. I'm not ranking captains today. I'm just going to talk about these contenders in the East. But Barkov showed what he could do over the last few years. Still ranked by many as being underrated. I think that he is an excellent two-way forward, one of the best two-way forwards in the game. I still think that with the amount of points that Tkachuk put up these past 2 years, I think Tkachuk's the one that a lot of us would take. And then you look at the big goals Tkachuk scored in the playoffs. The fact they've got Tkachuk and Barkov means you can't rule out Florida being able to do it again. And then Pittsburgh, and this is where I expect there to be a lot of people saying Pittsburgh's time is done. They missed the playoffs. Adding Karlsson's great, but their time is done. I'm not really there. 40, 31, and 11 was the record. Again, 1 point back of a playoff spot, so they weren't really far out. Tristan Jarry's the starter. There's been a lot of discussion about whether or not Jarry is an elite starter in the NHL. Their core four, pretty easy to come up with. Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and now Erik Karlsson becomes part of that core four. A lot of discussion about how As soon as Kyle Dubas takes over, he has another core four. But again, I think Pittsburgh would have been in on Erik Karlsson no matter who the general manager was. You guys can debate whether or not you think Ron Hextall would have gone for Erik Karlsson, or if he might have been able to get him, or maybe not, right? But their record over the last 4 years has been good. 163 wins, 95 regulation losses, 31 losses in overtime or shootouts, 618 points percentage, which is better than the Rangers. It's head of the New Jersey Devils as well. And this was their first playoff miss since 2006. So I did see some people saying, hey, it's too early to give New Jersey a shot at the Stanley Cup because, they just made the playoffs last year. But Pittsburgh made the playoffs in 2007, went all the way to the final and nearly won in 2008. And then they won it in 2009. Chicago, it didn't take them that long either after they started making the playoffs for them to win a Stanley Cup. So it does happen that way. The captain, of course, for Pittsburgh, somebody named Sidney Crosby, who might be too old to be called the kid at this point in his career, but he still plays like a kid out there. He's still one of the best 5-on-5 performers in the game. And because you have Crosby, because you've added Karlsson, you've still got Malkin, and Crosby and Malkin are coming off of a rarity where both of them didn't miss a game during the season. Good reason why there's people that are optimistic about Pittsburgh, and I get it, but there are definitely teams not on the board who could end up pushing one of these teams outside of the playoffs. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. And remember, going from left to right, these are the favorites on the website that I pulled the list from. Let me know who you feel might be a little bit overrated, who you feel is a little bit underrated, and how you feel about these teams' chances, as we are about a month away. We're exactly a month away from the start of the regular season, so that's kind of fun. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.